let's be clear that technology has been developing in the last 20, 25 years. It's not that we had all of this technology in year 2000. That's roughly the time when India started its journey on e-governance and digitalization. So there has been a rapid pace of technology. In fact, one of the questions you were asking about defense, now it's not about cloud photonics. It's about what we as a country need. Cloud photonics is a stepping stone,
right.
a very critical stepping stone. If we don't have that, we will not be able to service the defense. Let me step back and give a little more context as to what are we really talking about. You know, in the 1990s, there used to be a professor at MIT called Professor Negroponte, who had come out with this $100 laptop and so on and so forth. He came out with a very interesting principle that air will be replaced by wire and wire will be replaced by air. Now, what does that really mean? For those of your audience who are older, of my generation, which is still pretty young actually, they would have made long distance calls to US or even to Hyderabad from Delhi, and they would have called over a copper wire going all the way over through a satellite. They would have made a call over satellite, and therefore there would be a significant amount of delay in the conversation also, because the signals will go to the satellite up, which will be at 36,000 kilometers up, would be the geostationary satellite. It'll beam down the information. By the time it comes, there will be a delay. Similarly, you would have a satellite connectivity between US and India, and that's really what led to the telecom, to the IT revolution, because folks sitting in Bangalore on a very thin 64 kbps connectivity started.
I remember those, yes.
Right?
Dial-up screaming at each other. And
all
stuff.
of that is air. It's going through space. And what happened in the last mile? Last mile, there was copper wires coming to your home. You had this rotary dialing system. You would pick it up. And then as technology progressed, you had a modem which would connect to this copper wire, and it made this sound, and then it will magically connect. And you'll have a high-speed connectivity at 16 kbps, right? That's the kind of connectivity we would have. Over a period of time, since then till now, rapidly, the air part of it has been converted into fiber optic. So now you've got cables going all the way from US to Middle East to India to Singapore and so on and so forth, right? And therefore, when you look at war in today's day and time, you will see that there are ships which are just going and ripping apart this fiber optic because it's so critical, right? That's where the war part of it comes in. We have seen that happening in the Ukraine-Russia war. Chinese ships apparently have gone there and ripped apart the fiber optics, thereby degrading the ability of these economies to function. And as the economy gets degraded, the military also gets degraded. Now that's an indirect degradation. There's also a direct degradation. You have, for example, our indigenous aircraft carrier. It has got more fiber than the city of Delhi has. That's the amount of connectivity we need. Now, all of us have seen Operation Sindoor, right? We needed to respond within seconds, right? We didn't have the luxury to fire an anti-missile system after an hour or after 5 minutes. So we didn't have that kind of a luxury. So in order to be able to respond quickly, you would need fiber optic, which by definition carries light. Light is the fastest thing in this universe. You cannot go faster than light. And therefore, when you send a signal, it goes at the fastest speed possible. If you have a copper wire, electricity travels at 1/10 the speed of light, and therefore there is a delay. And therefore, when you had copper wires connecting Mumbai and Delhi, and you would make these trunk calls, there would be a delay because you're talking over a copper wire. As warfare shifts into network-centric warfare, as we have seen in Operation Sindoor, we need rapid response. Not only that, we need a very strong military-industrial complex. Now, fortunately, again, in this particular operation, we have seen that because of the steps the government has taken, there was significant industrialization from the military perspective that India had, and therefore we had weapons that the rest of the world had never seen or imagined. We could customize solutions from a war perspective, which are needed from our terrain, our war principles, and so on and so forth. If we don't have that capability to craft things as per our requirements, we will not be able to service the warfare. Now, what gets even worse is the fact that all of this can be degraded. So anything and everything that can be weaponized will be weaponized. We have seen that happening with pages.
True.
Right? A simple thing like pager can blow up. Now, let's not delude ourselves and say, oh, there was only one thing that happened. They had, and in this case, the Israelis, as we all know, they have at any point in time 30 to 40 such quote-unquote weapons out there. They use some, they don't use some. Some of them lapse and so be it, and technology changes. Why am I putting that up? It's because when we look at optical telecom, and I'm just focusing on optical because, again, the government has done a stupendous job on the rest of the telecom equipment. We have the mandatory telecom certification standard, MTCTE is out there. We've got the National Security Directive for telecommunications equipment. So we have these steps taken. But there are new technologies that have evolved, and there are some things which have fallen through the crack. And optical communication is one such thing which appears to have fallen through the crack, and which is where it's important that in today's context we really bring it up sharply so that we start solving it. Now, in optical, there are two parts to it. One is passive and one is active. Now, the point is, what is active and what is passive? Active is very simple. Anything that requires power is active. Anything that does not require power is passive.
It's like software and hardware.
It's like, well, not really. Not really. But let me give you an example. Like in a car, whatever is powered by the battery is active, but the door is passive unless you got sensors in it.
Got it.
Right? It's a dumb thing, right? Now, what turns out is that what appears to be dumb is not so dumb. So till now, the thought was that anything that is active, since it has got power, so it may be sending stuff to our adversaries outside of the country or would be compromising. What has turned out, thanks to some of the deep research done by the US government, is that even the passive components, such as like a fiber optic, can be weaponized. And how can it be weaponized is because it has a natural process of degradation. For example, if it gets exposed to hydrogen, the amount of data it can carry starts degrading to an extent that it can become opaque. So imagine billions of dollars spent in BharatNet 3, which is supposed to stay for the next 30 years because the fiber optics life is about 30 years, gets finished off in the next 5 years. That is weaponization that has happened, right? Similarly, the active part of it, if the transceivers, which is what cloud photonics focuses on, in opticals, the key part is the fiber through which the light passes. And when you pulse the light, you push information through. Now, when the light has to get converted to electrical signal, because all our computers, our systems, they are electrical in nature. You will take the light, convert it back to electrical. That's a transceiver. And then again, that computer has to send information out. It has to convert electricity into light and pump it out very quickly. Because as I said, electricity moves at a speed which is 1/10 the speed of light. It is a little too late and a little too fatal in that sense, because if it's 1/10 the speed, then by the time the missiles would have finished us off. So we do need to respond. So the transceivers become very critical. The fiber optic becomes very critical. And therefore, we need to move to a paradigm where we start protecting every part of our fiber optic and our optical communication. You will be interested to know that the US government has passed a policy called the Trusted Fiber Policy. And that policy says that every part of the fiber needs to be built within US. There has to be traceability, because if something starts degrading, we don't even know where to find it from. It can't be an importer who imports from God knows where, puts a stamp on it, and says, now it's branded. It is not. Can you tell me where it came from? Can you tell me which batch of preform it came from? Well, the answer is not there. So if the US communication is suddenly degrading, they wouldn't know how to handle it. And that's where they figured out that the fiber can be weaponized. They have figured out the transceivers can be weaponized. Now, the problem from our side is, therefore, how do we make sure that all our transceivers are controlled by us, are manufactured by us? How does all of our fiber gets manufactured locally? We don't want to import from anywhere else. And those are the policies that we need to start focusing on as a next step and strengthening what we already have as a base for telecom policies.
Okay, so
if I can just add.
Yes, so optic fiber industry is in a nascent stage in India. And what I want to check with you, Dr. Bhattacharya, is that how much of this stuff do we actually make here and how much of it do we have to import because of the supply chains that you mentioned earlier?
The whole bunch. And when we say import, it's largely from our northern neighbor. It's largely from China. So most of the transceivers that you don't make comes from China. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
Right? And why is that an issue? We have seen recently what China did to the US, which is obviously a superpower, when it stopped the supply of rare earth magnets.
Critical minerals.
A small thing, rare earth magnet, small thing, $70 million hit for China, a $2 trillion hit for the US industry. Everything from defense to automobiles, everything got hit. That is leverage. Now, you look at what they did with India. They stopped the travel to the Mansarovar Yatra, right? They said Indians can't travel. They thought that will put pressure on the government because Indians will be deeply affected and they'll be disaffected with the government in that sense. So we see how weaponization is happening, right? I'll stick to that note. If you look at when you open up your television and you want to watch, in today's world, you hardly watch, airwave based television. You watch on Netflix, you watch Z5, you watch all these other channels which are essentially streaming channels. How do they come to your TV? Now, in many of the urban homes, it's through a fiber that comes, right? It's called fiber to home. Now, a lot of other people will say, well, I don't use fiber and I can use my phone and it's got 300 Mbps connectivity or an air fiber, which is wireless, and I'll plug it in. So I don't need fiber. Well, where does the fiber connect to eventually? Your wireless. It goes to a tower. The tower in the back end is again connected to the fiber. Right, so that's why there's a huge push from the government to have fiberization of every single tower in this country, so that this 300 Mbps of speed in 5G can be supported. Right, so when you put the fiber, along with it comes the transceivers, and you need to continuously keep updating the transceivers because it is like a ball bearing in a machine. It can go bad. You have to fix it, and you will take it forward. So if tomorrow the Chinese decide that they need to put pressure on the Indians, just like they stop the Indians from going to Mansarovar Yatra, they will stop the supply of transceivers. Pretty soon, slowly, our networks will degrade. You will not be able to watch Netflix and your favorite shows and Z5 and so on and so forth. And that is what weaponization is, and that's what we are very, very worried about. We need to very rapidly accelerate the creation of the optical industry in this country. Obviously, the kind of stuff that cloud photonics and Tarun is talking about are extremely high-end. We also need the 10 Gbps, the 100 Gbps, and so on. Having said that, it's high time that India, with 16% of the global population and massive amount of data being consumed, bulk of our data travels on fiber optic, we need to have the 3.6 Tbps kind of connectivity that we were talking about, because that opens up possibilities for our population which a regular fiber cannot provide to us. We need enormous amount of data to be pumped in. For example, he was giving the example of a doctor and he talked about a teacher. Let's say we need a teacher who is streamed to each of the classrooms. Now the problem is that it's in a flat screen. Now tomorrow, if you want the teacher to look real in a 3D visualization, then you would need this kind of a connectivity. You need the 3.6 Tbps kind of connectivity, so that the students can then relate with this teacher who is almost physically
like a hologram.
Out there, right? Like a hologram, right? The holograms consume tremendous amount of data, and that's the only way for us to really provide education and healthcare to everybody. You can't manufacture doctors in a factory. You can't manufacture teachers in a factory. The only way to have a population scale outreach is through digital, which really means that I take an expert in media such as you, put you in front of all the media classrooms in this country, and at one go give them the best education, and they all feel that there is a teacher standing in front of it. Along with it comes in the layers of AI that Tarun mentioned, and all other layers of technology which are current technology, which is not even futuristic. These technologies will get enabled only when we have high-speed fiber optic coming in. Let me take another example. AI, everybody has heard of, artificial intelligence, right? You'll be surprised to know that those algorithms were not created now. They were created in the 1950s. Perceptron by Carnegie Mellon University, or Richard Cornell, that was created in 1956. Why didn't we have AI in 1956? Because we did not have the compute power. We did not have the data, right? So everything else started falling in place once we had the compute, we had the data, and so on and so forth. Similarly, many of the technologies that we have created as of now will get enabled when we've got high-speed fiber coming in, which is where control over these technologies becomes very, very critical for a country like India.
How much of the issues that he just talked about is due to our lack of an R&D culture?
So let me, amplify what you were saying and start from there and answer your question. Everything he said was also true for mobile phones, if you recollect. 10 years ago, how much were we producing? Nowhere. We were nowhere in the list. In the last 10 years, we have now become the second largest producer of mobile phones. How did that happen? We gave market access to our own manufacturers. Absolutely. So it is so strange. Indian manufacturers don't have access to the Indian market. How is that access denied? That access is denied by bringing in cheap imports, by playing out on the economies of scale. Just like he mentioned that if you don't have 10 million units being manufactured, your cost will be tremendously high. If you're manufacturing 1 million versus 10 million, so the consumers won't buy. So what did our government do? Very smartly, what they did is they said that under the WTO, what we had signed as an industrial trade agreement as ITA 1, that mobile phone is not the same as the mobile phone we use now, because that mobile phone had buttons in it. This is a smartphone. It was a fig leaf of an argument, but that allowed the government to go ahead and put duties on import of smartphones. So that cost got transferred to people, which is a small cost to pay, because what happened subsequently was that an explosion of manufacturing happened in India, and we eventually are all getting benefit out of it. We're getting cheaper iPhones, we're getting cheaper all kinds of other phones because they're getting manufactured here. And now we've got global scale. In between, India was dragged to the WTO courts because they said, hey, you're interpreting ITA the wrong way, the phones are the same. And we said, fine, then we'll lose it at the WTO courts and we'll take it to the appellate authority. Now, as all of us know, the powers to be in the global arena have already sabotaged the appellate authority in WTO, yes, and we simply use that. We simply use that. So we continue to put a BCD, a basic customs duty on import of phones, although we don't need it anymore because our phones are cheaper. The same strategy is needed for everything else, such as transceivers, such as fiber optics, such as everything where we truly want a domestic industry to happen. We seem to be going through this dichotomy where we say, no, we are very good players, global players, we will follow the rules, no matter what, that those who set the rules are themselves not following the rules, right? Nobody is following the WTO rules. 80% of the global economy is not following the WTO rules because 30% is US, 20% is China, and then few other countries. The bulk of the economies are not following the WTO rules. But we said, no. We cannot increase BCD. We cannot put anti-dumping duties. We cannot put quality controls and so on and so forth. We are trying to be, as they used to say, whiter than the whites in that sense, right? Whereas we are not looking at what is really needed for us. For example, let me argue out the transceivers case and fill me in because you are the industry expert. The argument will be if I put a BCD, a basic customs duty on the import of transceivers from China, then my cost of connectivity will go up. Now that cost is a very minor cost when you look at the total cost of the infrastructure. More importantly, I will know that infrastructure will work for next 20 or 30 years. But if I bring the components from China, it may be cheap now, but it will be Chinese, which means it may not work in the next 5 years, right? And so you have to continuously keep changing it. So is it really cheap? We don't know, right? And by our experience, it is not. And secondly, we need to provide that headspace, that financial headspace to the domestic companies so that they get protected from this economy of scale and the subsidies that are being given. Land is free in China. Power is highly, highly subsidized. We all know that. There is an export subsidy that is given there. And on top of it, what we are seeing, at least in the chemicals, is that the third grade chemicals is what is sent out here because we don't have quality controls. And is that what we want to have? So when we are talking about a photonic industry, it has to be looked at in a 360 degree. We need the right set of people to come here. It's a challenging proposition. The Koreans had to increase their salary to double the US salary in order to attract the Koreans settled in US to come back to Korea, right? For some magical reasons, we're having smart Indians coming back. Let's just try and support that. So one part of the issue seems to be getting solved. And then there was the technology part of it. we need to ensure that there's a technology roadmap. We need to ensure that there is a demand being given to them. When the government wants to roll out something, is there a bias towards domestic players? And yes, there is. But is it there in photonics? That needs to be worked up. So we need to strengthen the government policies. The pillars are already there, but I think the photonics part needs to be brought in, and we need to provide support both for the passive component, which is the fiber. In fact, India has the ability to take sand, turn that into preform, convert that into optical fiber, put the sheeting on it, and actually give you a fiber optic from sand to the fiber optic. If you don't support it, parts of it will get degraded. What we have seen is very targeted dumping by the Chinese on this value chain. Similarly, wherever we see that there is a disproportionate impact on the value chain, that part of it is getting targeted by the Chinese. So they don't target the entire value chain, just the very critical part of it, finish off the Indian capacities. It has already got weaponized. So if you don't need to put a bomb to destroy his production capacity can be destroyed by simply selling the same stuff at half the price. Absolutely. That's the bomb I'm using, right? What is the impact? When I'm having INS Vikrant or Virat on the sea with all the fighter aircrafts, the Tejas, and so on and so forth, every bit of it is using fiber optics, optical communication, transceivers. The Tejas will have it, the Mirages will have it, the aircraft carrier will have it, and all of it is dependent on China. And we don't know whether it's working, we don't know whether it'll work in future. We don't know if when it stops working, can it be replaced quickly? Can be replaced domestically? And when war happens, it's a war of attrition that happens. Right?
Obviously.
It carries on. You look at the Russia-Ukraine war, and it's just carrying on. So Russia did not have all the weapons on day one, but they have an ability to manufacture all of it because they have the technology, they have the supply chain, or they quickly establish the supply chain post facto. That is what we need. If part of our defense supply chain is eventually dependent on China, that's a very threatening situation that we are in.
You're talking just defense, but even in the civilian domain too, it becomes a big challenge.
Of course, the military and civilian go hand in hand. If our troops are in the border and our banking system stops because the fiber optic is stopped,
you have a problem.
That's the end of the war.
Sibal, it's a conversation which will probably require another round subsequently, and I hope to bring the both of you in. But let me try and close this with a very simple question to both of you individually, and I'll start with Dr. Bhattacharya. That if you were to sort of, say as a policy, we need to do 1, 2, 3, could you just list them out in terms of what should the government do right now to help people like?
Sure. See, the policies are already there. So there is PLI, there is ability to report basic customs duty, there is ability to put a check, mandatory testing of components and telecom equipment, MTCT, all of that is there. We need to now bring that policy infrastructure onto photonics. That's basically what we're talking about. So that policy infrastructure is missing out in photonics, including fiber optic, including transceivers, and everything else before and after. Let me take the example of US again. They've got an act which is pretty much like Atmanirbhar America Act, which is called the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA. Under the BABA Act, they say that for many of the infrastructure, 100% of the value add has to be done domestically, and telecom is one of them. So they will not accept anything which is not 100% domestically manufactured. Now, does that lead to the cost of infrastructure going up? Absolutely yes. But that cost is cheaper when you look at the total cost of ownership based on security threats, based on jobs created, based on control of technology. And that's the mindset shift we need to have. Now, at the top levels of the government, we have that mindset shift that if we need to pay 10% more, so be it, because there is a larger game that we need to play. That needs to percolate to
but
everybody else.
Who picks up that cost?
Well, at different sets of people, eventually the citizens. Now, let's say we look at BharatNet 3 as an example. The bulk of the cost is being paid by taxpayers' money. And it is taxpayer who's paying it, right? So it's essentially us only who's paying it. Who paid the cost for higher cost mobile phones when there was a custom duty put on mobile phone? You and I paid for it.
Sure.
Did we complain about it? We didn't. Because we knew that it'll lead to jobs for both of us or our children, and we'll have a larger ecosystem to play. So there is a larger trade-off that needs to happen from a techno-economic perspective, which is why I created the term digital colonization way back in 2005 to explain this phenomena. There is an economic aspect, there is an IPR aspect, there is a trade law aspect, which is kind of boxing us in, and it's not letting us unleash the power of techno economy or technology driven economy in India. And therefore, we need to take this series of micro steps. For example, what we did with the phone, we need to replicate it with the components, we need to replicate it with the entire photonics, and do it at a war footing. We can't be dilly-dallying it anymore, because every time we dilly-dally, for us it seems like 3 months more, 6 months more. For a little startup like Mr. Sibal's, it is 2 quarters gone.
Absolutely.
2 quarters gone, half a year gone. They had planned
That
for
hits the
money.
bottom line in a big way.
They had planned for money for 1 year. Half of that is gone. When will they scale up? When will they reach the market? When will they, start getting some return on their investment? So pretty much we have signed the death deal for them by delaying these policy steps in technology.
Mr. Sibal, if you that the people who actually take these decisions are going to be listening to us, but you brought up this thing about Qualcomm. I was told that we design chips in India, but we don't manufacture them.
That is correct.
Where is that thing coming from?
So they're two different industries. And as you were saying, there is a design-led incentive, the DLI that is there, which is like PLI. Why is it different? It's because the economics are different. As again Tarun mentioned, manufacturing means you need to have multi-billion-dollar setup.
And supply chains.
And supply chains. The entire gases ecosystem, the chemical ecosystem, the people ecosystem, the talent ecosystem. So to sustain that, you need to have enormous aggregation of demand, which is what Taiwan very successfully did. And about 10, 12 years back, China looked up and said, look, we need to have the same as what Taiwan has, for 2 reasons. One, because then they can shift the semiconductor industry to China. And second, if they do that, then Taiwan is not important to the rest of the world. So for them to walk into Taiwan becomes much easier. So for 2 specific reasons, they went ahead and they picked up all the fabs that Fujitsu had, Renesas had. And they were up for sale, and China just picked it up. Whereas India's perspective at that point in time was that why should we pick up second-hand fabs? And we did not pick them up. They were available to us. It was being, the sales was managed by an Indian gentleman called Anand Agarwal. He's no more. He passed away very young. He had reached out, and we did not have that appetite. We wanted to have new $5 billion fabs being put in, wherein we did not have the expertise to run it. We still don't have the expertise to run fabs. And whereas these fabs are coming in with back orders already, 75% of it will be running, which is important, because if you get the fabs and they don't run, then they're a piece of junk. So these are enormous monsters. They consume tremendous amount of power, tremendous amount of water, and they need to be fed on a continuous basis, which is why aggregation is important. The Chinese government stepped in and made sure that this monster of semiconductor fab is fed. I wouldn't be surprised that sometime in future we may need to go to China for fabricating instead of Taiwan, right? And therefore, it's good to look at that design is happening in India, but that's a different industry. Fabrication is a different industry, and it's a different ballgame. And our government, the current government, has put tremendous amount of focus to make sure that we have fabs coming up. This is the first time in the history that we have fabs in India. We have had smaller fabs and which got burned down. The semiconductor labs in Chandigarh got burned down under very, very mysterious circumstances. Right? But those are also not at scale. This is the first time in the history that we're having fabs built up at scale in Assam, in Gujarat, and other places that's coming up. So we are slowly catching up, but we have lost 10, 15 years in that process.
10, 15 years, and by which time everybody else will have progressed as well.
Well, specifically China. That's the critical part.
Absolutely.
I mean, are we okay to send our fabs to our chips to China for tape out and manufacturing? That's dangerous. We can't.
That's almost a rhetorical question, but yes, I understand.
I mean, imagine BrahMos missiles and Akash thieves, their chips are coming from China. That's a dangerous proposition.
This has been like I said earlier, this has been a absolutely eye-opening conversation for me. I'm sure it will be for all our viewers. I would like to bring both of you back again,
Thank you.
perhaps to extend this conversation to the next level. Thank you so very much for being with us today. And like I said, it's been a wonderful learning experience for me.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
very
us.
much. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
That was Mr. Tarun Sibal, who does some incredibly important work as one of the co-founders of Cloud Photonics, and Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, whose work intersects and the technology and governance, a very, very critical level of intersection, talking to us about how that impacts the photovoltaic chain and other issues which are of critical importance to us. I do hope you enjoyed this roundtable, and I look forward to having you with us again. This is Ramananda Sengupta.